In 1960, breakfast in a British kitchen wasn't colourful, sweet, or fast. It was a metal pan sizzling on a gas ring, lard bubbling in the fat pan, and bread toasted directly over an open fire until the edges charred black. These were the cheap, heavy breakfasts that kept millions of British kids and workers going through freezing winters on pennies a week. But within just a few years, almost every single one of them vanished from our morning routines. So how did a handful of American cereal boxes completely wipe out a century of British breakfast traditions? Bread and dripping. If you grew up in a working-class house in the 1960s, you knew the dripping pot. It was a heavy ceramic jar or a tin bowl sitting on the kitchen windowsill, right next to the stove. Every Sunday, when your mum roasted a joint of beef or mutton, the fat drained into that pot. By Monday morning, it had settled into 3 distinct layers: clean white fat on top, a rich cream in the middle, and the dark, salty brown jelly stuck right at the bottom. Getting a slice of bread and dripping before school was an art. You had a thick doorstop of white bread, cut from a loaf that came unwrapped from the local bakery. You spread the fat thick like butter, but the real prize was scraping the spoon all the way to the bottom to spread that brown meat jelly over the top. A heavy pinch of salt, a crack of black pepper, and you had a breakfast that cost literally 0 pennies. It was warm, it was savory, and it sat like a brick in your stomach right until lunchtime. Men walked miles into coal mines, shipyards, and car plants with nothing more than dripping toast in their bellies. Doctors today would have a fit looking at it. But back then, nobody was counting calories. You needed fuel to survive a house without central heating, an icy walk to the bus stop, and a hard day's work. Yet, as beef got cheaper and butter returned properly after rationing, people started seeing beef dripping as poor man's food. Families became embarrassed to keep the pot on the window. But if you think bread and dripping was basic, what we did to stale bread in a frying pan was even heavier. Fried bread in lard. Before electric toasters sat on every kitchen counter, there was only one thing to do with bread that had gone hard: throw it straight into the fat pan. This wasn't light golden toast. This was a thick slice of stale bread dropped straight into a cast-iron skillet bubbling with melted lard or bacon fat. The bread drank the fat like a sponge. It hissed on the stove, turned deep golden brown, and came out with edges as sharp as glass. When you bit into it, hot grease flooded your mouth with salty bacon flavor. It was crispy on the outside, soft and rich in the middle, and impossible to leave on the plate. If you were lucky, your mum cracked an egg into the same pan right next to it, basting the top with spoonfuls of bubbling lard until the yolk went cloudy and white. You dragged the corner of the fried bread straight through the runny yolk. That was luxury on an ordinary Tuesday. It took 5 minutes to cook, cost practically nothing, and warmed a freezing kitchen with the smell of sizzling fat. But while fried bread was a treat, the everyday staple that kept every British child going through the winter months came in a paper sack. Porridge with salt and butter. Porridge in the 1960s was not the instant, microwavable oat pots you see on supermarket shelves today. Your mum bought coarse-rolled oats in plain blue paper bags. It went into a heavy saucepan on the stove with cold water and a wooden spurtle to stir it. No sugar, no honey, and definitely no fruit. In millions of northern and Scottish homes, porridge was made thick and savoury, with a generous pinch of coarse salt thrown in while it bubbled. When it hit the bowl, it was so thick a spoon could stand upright in the middle. To make it edible, your mum put a small knob of cold butter right in the centre, letting it melt into a yellow puddle, and poured cold full cream milk around the outside rim. You dipped your spoon into the cold milk first, then into the hot, salty porridge, eating from the edge toward the middle. It burned the roof of your mouth, stuck to your ribs, and kept the winter chill out of your bones on the walk to school. It was simple, honest, and filled you up for hours. But for the kids who hated lumpy porridge, British factories were about to invent something totally new. Ready Brek, the instant revolution. In the late 1950s, a food company called J. Lyons and Company noticed something. British mums were tired of scrubbing crusted porridge pots every single morning. So in 1957, they launched Ready Brek. It was oat flour ground so fine it looked like dust. You didn't need to simmer it for 20 minutes on the stove. You just poured hot water or warm milk over it in the bowl, gave it a quick stir with a spoon, and it instantly turned into smooth, steaming porridge. It was marketed as the modern breakfast for the space age. By the 1960s, it was in almost every family kitchen in Britain. It didn't have lumps. It took 30 seconds to prepare, and kids actually ate it without an argument. Ready Brek proved that British parents loved convenience. But while hot oats were changing fast, the king of the British breakfast table was still something you boiled in a pan. Boiled egg and toast soldiers. Nothing says a 1960s British childhood quite like a soft-boiled egg sitting in a tiny ceramic egg cup. It was precision work. Your mum put a single egg into a small pan of boiling water, timed it with a tiny 3-minute sand glass on the shelf, and lifted it out the second the sand ran out. Beside it sat 2 thick slices of white toast, smothered in butter, cut carefully into neat, thin strips. The soldiers. You took a butter knife, gave the top of the egg a sharp tap to crack the shell, and peeled back the lid to reveal the bright yellow runny yolk. Then came the test, dipping the soldier right to the bottom of the egg without the toast breaking in half. If the egg was too hard, you were disappointed. If it was too runny, your toast drowned. But when it was timed perfectly, it was the best breakfast in the world. It was cheap, rich in protein, and gave every child a tiny ritual to start the day. For decades, this was what Britain ran on: cheap fats, hot grains, and fresh eggs. But lurking just around the corner was a food revolution from across the Atlantic that would sweep all of it into the dustbin of history. The American sugar invasion. In the early 1960s, a box of American breakfast cereal was still considered an occasional treat or a luxury. British families still believed a proper breakfast had to be hot and heavy. Then the marketing machine arrived. Companies like Kellogg's and Quaker started spending millions flooding British television with bright cartoon characters. Even better for the companies, they started putting cheap plastic toys inside the boxes. Suddenly, millions of British children weren't begging their mothers for bread and dripping or hot porridge. They were screaming in the supermarket aisles for the box with the free toy inside. For busy mothers entering the workforce in the late 60s and 70s, cereal was a miracle. There were no frying pans to scrub, no dripping pots to manage, and no porridge pans sticking to the stove. You handed the child a box, a bottle of milk, and walked out the door. Within a single generation, the heavy, savory breakfasts that had powered the British Empire and survived the Blitz were replaced by colorful cardboard boxes packed with sugar and puffed corn. The ceramic dripping pot disappeared from the windowsill. The spurtle was tucked away in the drawer, and a centuries-old British morning ritual was gone forever. If any of these breakfasts brought back memories of your childhood kitchen, tell us which one you ate the most in the comments below. And if you know someone who still remembers the taste of real bread and dripping, share this with them. Please subscribe to the channel to help keep these forgotten stories alive.